I'm not going to ask his question for him since he actually is in the building, but he had a question for you. So go ahead, D, unmute, and you can ask it yourself, King.
Okay. Blak Pantha, how you doing, first of all?
Oh, peace, brother. I'm doing well.
Okay, my question, I'll read it the way I wrote it. Do you find that American blacks in Africa know more about the history of cultures before 1917 than the Africans in the various 54 countries? Or are some Africans more informed on their culture than others?
Before I ask this question, I wanna get one quick clarification. Are you pointing to a specific event in history, or are you just pointing to that time period?
Well, we have, in particular, have a lot of Nigerian immigrants here in Las Vegas, and I was speaking to one in particular, and he was saying that he referenced 1917 as their time. So I was like, well, a lot of people who practice Pan Africanism here in the United States who are American black may know more information about previous historic civilizations than the Africans who reference 1917 as their starting point when the whatever government took over from Europe. But that's why I asked that question. Point.
Okay, and I believe he's pointing to the time period of the British coming in and establishing their control and rule and the events after. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do reference that date in reference to Nigeria because of the Royal Dutch Company and other people, which is known as Unilever today. So I'm aware of that date, but it's kind of hard to blanket so many people in Nigeria because you'll meet people of so many different walks of life. You have people just like that brother that, will quote that date, but then you have other people that are aware of the history, depending on what tribe they come from, if they're Igbo or if they're Yoruba, if they're Ishan, they could be a multitude of different things. If they're Edo, particularly people that are Yoruba from Ile Ife have a strong sense of history because their history is embedded in every fabric of their society. They have huge statues dedicated to their heroes, the Queen Morimi, Oduduwa, Obatala. They have all of these big statues, and even their universities are named after some of these deities in history. So coming from a European perspective, they have a deep purpose and a deep sense of history. Igbo people have a deep sense of history. But particularly some of the younger generation is where you'll find what I think you're talking about, where people may not be aware of some of the things that occurred in their past. As unfortunate as that is, this is why my scholarship group exists, not just for African Americans, but for Africans on the continent. When I was in Senegal, I met a young brother. We were on a lake, which is called Lake La Rose or Lake Reba, which is called the Pink Lake because of its high salt content that turns the water pink. We were on the lake and he pointed at a white gentleman and he said, "Look at the tubob." Tubob is their word in Wolof for white man. I said, "Yeah, does that mean white man?" He said, "Yes." And it was a silence for about maybe 15 seconds. And then he says, "How is the tubob in America?" And I looked at him and I said, you don't know? And he said, "No, I've heard rumors, but I don't know for sure." So I asked the brother how much time he had because we have a lot to talk about, brother. And that's not the first time I've heard of a native African being unaware of some of the events in history pertaining with Europeans and Africans or African Americans. It's not the first time I've heard that. So some of our people are ignorant to the historical facts, unfortunately. Some of them aren't. Some of them are very astute and even write books about the current dealings with Europeans, and they cite historical narratives. So it all depends on which African you meet, really. But unfortunately, that narrative does exist, brother.
So you actually, just like what I suspected, you're teaching Africans about something that they should know about themselves, and you come from a whole different continent teaching them about themselves.
Essentially, in some instances, yes, because our history is so long, so deep, so vast, but it's fragmented at different points. So unless you do the meticulous research using a variety of tools, paleontology, linguistics, different scientific methods, unless you do this work, you can be from somewhere and not realize something about your people. For example, I had a Nigerian tell me that they never met an Igbo, that Igbo and Yoruba people didn't interact until a recent time period. And that's totally false. I keep telling people there are no electric fences in Africa. So people just roamed around, and essentially these new tribal names that we have are new inventions. If you go further back in African history, some of these names don't even exist. For example, the name Yoruba doesn't come from the Yoruba people. It comes from the Hausa people. And it was actually a derogatory phrase in which they were calling people from this area. But a lot of Nigerians don't know that. It's the same thing with the Jola people. The Jola people in Senegambia, that's not their original name. They have a name called Eshulaulu, but a lot of people do not know that name because, unfortunately, with the colonialism and the interjecting of foreign religions, some of our history is not at the forefront to where it would have been if we would have been left to our own devices. So since you spend more time learning about Jesus or Allah, you don't get to learn about the native history of your land. And it's not even taught in schools. So some Africans, depending on the area, grow up and they don't know these original names or their original history. And then, somebody like me comes around and they're like, well, how do you know this? And, it's a conversation from there.
So do you, are you prescribe to Pan Afrikanism then? I would
Yes.
Okay. So do you believe that the black man and black woman should be their building, or should all the different continents around the globe where black people are, they fight there to get what's necessary and use Africa as the main resource, with the Africans in the 54 countries building them to make it a utopia for black people to fight white racism and white supremacy? Do you believe that?
My philosophy changes based upon where you live.
Okay.
If you're in America, my philosophy is simple: get out. Just like the movie. That's my philosophy. It doesn't mean that that was going to work for everyone. But this is what I work to. I work toward repatriation. Now, it's unfeasible to say that every single person can leave and go somewhere, right? So we're going to need people to continue the struggles of our ancestors in America to, work towards just having a life that you won't be hunted and killed and discriminated. So we need people to stay in America too. But if you can afford it, get out. Because there are a lot of opportunities, especially in the continent, that we as Africans in America can take advantage of. Your money will stretch much longer. You can develop business and commerce and relations, and we can build something generationally to where 2-3 generations from now, some of the things that we go through in America won't be a problem for us.
Okay, so go ahead.
I was going to say, it's also not feasible for every single person to repatriate to Africa. Some people may want to repatriate to the Caribbean. Some people may want to repatriate to other places. My philosophy, if you can get to somewhere where most of the people look like you and build with them, that's a big step forward. It's a big step forward, whether it be St. Croix or St. Thomas or Jamaica or Haiti or, there's a lot of opportunities in other places other than the continent that people may not think about when they discuss repatriation. But, find the best place for you. You may have a business that is more fruitful in another part of the world other than Africa. But I do recommend that everybody at least, travel around and make your decision, visit Africa, visit other places. Just make your decision from there. Mm-hmm. But I do always encourage that if you can, try to get out of this oppressive country and situation that we are currently in with the USA, this abusive relationship that we're in with the USA. And that's just my philosophy.
Okay, last question here on this topic. Well, what do we say about the Nigerians, the Senegalese, the Cameroons that come to America, educate? They were supposed to go back to build Africa, the Pan African paradise. What do we say about that when they're here living, and then once American blacks built the country, but we're supposed to leave and stay, or are they supposed to leave too?
I don't think there's a responsibility as we're supposed to that we can impose on everyone. It would be great if we could keep our geniuses in country, and that goes for Africa and America. Africans go to places like London, America, other universities. They earn these degrees, and some of them never return home. And then you have African Americans that go study abroad and never come back to the ghetto and help. So the situation is twofold. No matter where you go to study, no matter where you go to gain your expertise, come back home and help your people. No matter even where you live. If you want to stay in America and you're a continental African, fine. But help your people too. You got to figure out that balance. You can't just run away from the problems because the problems won't never fix itself. We have geniuses in, say, if you live in DC and they go study in Japan, never come back. You have to come back and help your people. That's where the responsibility comes into play. Help your people no matter where you gained your expertise. For me, repatriating, I'm not going back just to fit in. I'm going back to start some business, start some commerce, something that'll bring something to the continent it doesn't have. That should be the goal. And I understand the argument of, yes, we built America. We were very instrumental in what is now called America, as people say, on our backs. That is true. But we have to love ourselves and love our children and love our families enough to get out of this abusive relationship, because America is not going to change. It's just not. We've tried to appeal to morality. We've tried to appeal to simple human rights, civil rights, economic rights, We've tried everything. The only thing we haven't tried is leaving.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. And if we're great enough to where we provided them the means to build this empire, so that means we're great enough to build it again in Africa or somewhere else, wherever you want to go.
So it's slavery in America, but it's colonization over in Africa, and the Africans seem not to be able to control their own countries, especially with the Chinese influxing in. So how do they handle that before we stake our claim in that land, a land that we weren't born in? How do they, does it take them to fix that problem before we would say, okay, we're going to pull up roots from the place that we know that we built, and that, and they can't control actual countries that they were actually born in, their land?
Well, let's dissect the problem. You mentioned the Chinese. The reason why the Chinese is in Africa is for handouts. Why are Africans taking handouts from Chinese? Because part of the problem is what we discussed earlier. We don't go back. Their people don't go back. So if you don't invest in Africa and they have problems and they don't have the capital to cover it, somebody somewhere is going to see a business opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to build a bridge. And I'm talking about the people that necessarily don't want to go back to Africa. You can still build that bridge by investing in Africa, because Africa is just trying to solve problems. They're not looking at where the money is coming from. So if it's us that invest in Africa, if it's us that build up things in Africa, if it's us that, build these commerce deals and everything like that, there's no need for a Chinese. There's no need for a Japanese. There's no need for any of these other foreign groups that come into Africa with their big sacks of money, because Africans are getting tired of Chinese. Africans are getting tired of all these because they don't get treated right. They're learning what we learned a millennia ago. We already knew that. They're getting that taste of that medicine in some countries now. Like, man, these guys came over here, they said they was going to do this, and now they're treating us all funky. It's time for these dudes to get out of here. So being that we've already learned that lesson, we can provide so much wisdom to Africa. Listen, we understand that you guys may not have the population that remembers what happened here, but we do. We remember. And if you would allow us, in your parliaments and caucus and whatever you have, and help you with this problem, both of it can be beneficial to both of us. Because one thing about these oppressive people, they're not going to change. They're going to do the same things over and over and over. It's up to us globally to change what we're doing. And if we don't change globally what we're doing, we're going to be in the same conversation 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 years from now. But we have to have dedicated people on both sides of the coin that's willing to come to that conversation and say, well, what can I do here? And then people in the continent say, well, what can I do to help y'all there? We got to build these bridges. It's not going to be an overnight solution, but that's the best solution that I can come up with.
Hey, like Sean said in the chat, he said spears are flying. You right, King. Spears are flying. And I see Miss Moon over there. Miss Moon. I think Miss Moon want and Crazy D. All right, I'll split that $4 cash app that came in, because you just got it in with that brother. But Crazy D, back to you. I want to promote, certainly because you interviewing me, and again, I'm used to interviewing people. I've interviewed people for 30 years, and So, you know, I think it'll be fun to be on the other side of it this time. So, and I couldn't think of too many other people uh, that I would appreciate being interviewed by, and I would be remiss not to mention that I'm also have an interview coming up that I'm being interviewed by pretty much the dean of old school hip hop interviewers, my brother Jay Quan. So Jay Quan don't even talk to you unless you know if you after 1986, he don't even he don't even interview you
Yeah.
because this brother has interviewed everybody. I'm talking about the pioneers, cats that were in hip hop before records. You know, I don't even go get into mentioning all those people. But yeah, I look forward on the 7th. Now give me a little insight. What we talking about, King?